We are now officially on the air with the illustrious filmmaker J.D. Ellenberger, which I'm super excited to be here, not just because you happen to be the most stylish man in filmmaking business that I know of, but you're also an amazing gentleman, and you also happen to make some pretty incredible movies, including Lachrymose Primrose, which, of course, we are here to discuss today. So thanks so much, J.D., for being here. Really, really appreciate this, man.
Thank you, Rick. I greatly appreciate being here as well as your kind words. Deeply humbled.
Absolutely. And this has been such an something I've been looking forward to for a long time. I think it was about a year ago that you had reached out to me, telling me that you had this incredible film that you're working on. And I guess for everybody watching this too, they might be wondering what the heck is Lachrymose Primrose. So I wanted to start off there. I figured that's probably a pretty good place to start. So when folks see the title Lachrymose Primrose, what is Lachrymose Primrose?
It's a dark psychological thriller that was actually based off of a short story that I had written approximately 6 years ago. And I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to make this film because I was in the process of pre-production on another film, completely, entirely different, and COVID hit. And the other production had a much larger cast, much larger crew with at least a dozen locations, and everything was shutting down and we were unable to move forward with that. So I went back through my notebook of short stories and this Lachrymose Primrose was always one of my favorites that stood out to me. And I decided to adapt that from, I believe the short story was roughly 6 pages. So trying to take a 6-page short story and expound on that to turn it into a feature-length film. It was a lot of fun. It was trying, but it was fun. And I'm thankful that we did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And why that short story, JD? What was it about that particular story that stood out to you that you thought that's one that needs to be expanded, that's one that people need to see?
Now, this won't really give anything away. It's really nothing that's not mentioned in the synopsis of the film, but the lead character, Caleb McCallum, is a one-time best-selling author, and the story revolves around him and his struggles, his psychological struggles, all over the loss of his beloved primrose plants that died. And I suppose what I liked best about that story and why I chose to move forward with that is I like the aspect of something so mundane happening, something that could happen to you or I or any other person on a daily basis. And we wouldn't have a complete breakdown like Caleb did, but this one little, small, mundane, item, it just drove him to the brink of mad. And so I really like that because I've always been interested in psychology and wondering what makes people cross the line, because we all have days where you feel like you could go off the deep end, whether you're late for work because you're stuck in a traffic jam or somebody is in your face about something. But the rational mind has composure, and we know there's a line that you don't cross. So I've always been intrigued by what causes somebody to actually snap and cross that line. And the fact that Caleb did that with something so mundane as the death of a flower, I just always really liked that.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting exploration that I think a lot of people can relate to, like you suggested, that I think it's just human nature to, whether it's intentional or not, to put so much into one single thing that if that one single thing fails, that's their everything. One thing that I really enjoyed about this film, this is a ghost story where the ghost story is just a layer of the film. The ghost story is really secondary, I think, to, Caleb's own inner demons, and the ghost story just happens to be an extra layer to that. Was that something that you did intentionally, or what can you maybe talk to us about that as far as how do you make a ghost story that's not really a ghost story?
I was very concerned about, when we were in the process of filming, whether that would convey how I intended it to. And as we all know, sometimes the written word does not convey properly in cinema. And that's why I think a lot of people often have problems with the film that strays from the book. And this happens a lot with Stephen King films where people complain that it was changed too much. So I really had to expand quite meticulously and be very careful, because I didn't want, and I've even had people who are privy to have inside looks at the film say to me, I was really hoping that we would see more of the ghost, which the ghost actually does appear several times throughout the film. And my response was always, I didn't want the ghost to become the primary focus of the film. The focus of the film needed to be on Caleb and his mental health and why he crossed that line from sanity to insanity and madness. And it was difficult. So I'm glad that you feel that it works and it takes a back seat to the main story. So that was very difficult, but I felt that it was important to the story. I didn't want this to be, I didn't want this to be another poltergeist or, whatever other possible ghost story could be. I wanted the main focus to be on Caleb, but I wanted the backstory of what drove him mad. And I'm just glad that it worked.
Oh, it worked extremely well. And I noticed when I watched the film too, it almost just seemed like the ghost was simply almost part of a group of these other of all these other things that haunted Caleb. Everything that he attached himself to, that eventually, whether he failed them in the end or it failed him in the end, or a little bit of both, it's all these things that kind of piled up on him that were all just simply haunting him, which I thought was fascinating because, of course, certainly one of the literal ghosts in there was an absolutely terrifying, really unsettling scene, but it was just part of all the other things that were haunting him, such as, his previous success with his book, his own marriage, things like that. So did you find that was difficult for you to sort of think, okay, this is going to be my focus, this is going to be my focus?
No, I knew all along that my main focus was Caleb. And when I wrote the short story, because it was only 6 pages, there were only 2 characters. There was only Caleb and Elizabeth. As far as, what we could perceive with our mind as a reader, I mean, he was struggling with some mental health. But when I needed to convert the short story into a screenplay, the one thing that I tried to come to grip with is that I needed to introduce at least a few more other characters to the story. And when I decided that, okay, I need to introduce other characters, where do I want to go with them without taking the light off of Caleb? So I thought that everybody that we're introduced to throughout the film in some way or another should be an antagonist to Caleb's mental health. And so I really expanded on the ghost. The ghost was always there, and the tumultuous relationship with Elizabeth, his wife, that was always there. But for our viewers, when they see the movie, we're introduced to some other outside individuals who we later on find out that also, have a hand in his well-being.
Or not so well-being.
Or not so well, depending on. That's true. Very good point.
Yeah, perfect. And I really think that the one thing that absolutely separates you from being just another filmmaker, that you truly make your mark. You've got a very distinct style about you. I know that your specific style is so elevated that you do in fact do some modeling on the side as well. You're probably not going to find too many Baywatch pictures, guys. So anybody that's watched is expecting those. Sorry, you certainly are a horror buff, but you're not a horror fan in the buff.
In the buff, right?
Sorry to disappoint everybody, but I thought I'd set that precedent just to make sure, people are...
Yeah, there's no OnlyFans page or anything like that.
Exactly. There's only GD. But regarding that, though, one of the things I absolutely love about the film is that you really blend absolutely everything. You use every sense to its full potential, I think. Certainly with the lighting, also with the sound that you have on there, with the various music that you pick. it really changes the scenery to the point where you can have a scene where nobody says anything, but there's constantly things going off in your brain about what you should be feeling about this. Where did you get that from? And can you give us maybe an idea for, what your approach is and how you kind of arrive at your sensibilities for blending all that together?
To be honest with you, I've always been influenced, and this is another great experience, a wonderful memory that I have with my father, who passed right before the film completed, which was really hard to take, because this was the one film that I really, really wanted him to see. He was always so supportive. But not to digress, my father and I spent so much time watching noir films growing up. And, the one thing that had always struck me is just, the lighting and the music and the tension that could be created over something as simple as you mentioned, a guy sitting there reflecting back and sorting out his inner demons. And so lighting and sound, and I really wanted it to be a fully immersive experience. When you watched the Lachrymose Primrose, I wanted it to be as though the camera was the third person, being the viewer in the room with Caleb and Elizabeth. And obviously I can't objectively say whether or not that worked and conveyed how I intended on the screen, but that was my hope, is that you as the viewer felt like you were stuck in this very claustrophobic home, because we shot in very tight quarters. And so I wanted the movie to have a very claustrophobic type feel, and you were just a voyeur watching this story unfold. So to me, the lighting, and, I often speak about the fear of losing any of my senses, most importantly, sight or sound, and what would be scarier. Because I'm such a lover of music, I think that I would rather lose my sight long before my hearing. But yeah, so those are all like dealing with all of the senses. I think when you watch a film, it's just so much more of an experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree, I'm happy to say that you absolutely nailed that in that regard. And like any good experience, if you have a good experience with something, you're going to want to experience it again, no matter what, if you know the plot or not. I mean, it's the same reason I think that we can probably find a favorite roller coaster and just kind of go around and around several times, because it was just a great experience. Although we know exactly what to expect and how it's going to end, it's still a great experience. And I found that this was very much in that.
Thank you. I feel as though my desire for this film, because it was something that I had laid out for myself, it was a blueprint that I had laid out for myself well in advance, before production even began, is that I really wanted to focus on light, color, and sound. And that's probably because my previous film, Noctambulist, which was released in 2018, was a black and white silent thriller. And it was a lot of fun on that film, working on a neo-noir type film to work with the shadows and lighting, which I got to apply also to Lachrymose Primrose. And I've always been real old school with my filmmaking approach, where, for years, even some of my earliest works that nobody will ever see, everything was shot in black and white. And it's probably because I grew up with Alfred Hitchcock and Rod Serling and all the wonderful Fritz Alistair Murnau and Fritz Lang. But with this film, it was kind of refreshing. I knew that I still wanted to shoot the movie in HD, because I wanted to give it that old feel. I didn't want to go 4K yet, but I'm like, we're gonna shoot this in HD, but I really want to focus on the light, the sound, especially with like ASMR. I really thought that was important to add. And the funny thing is because the pandemic hit and I had to completely adapt and change what I was going to work on next, and everything had shut down, we shot Lachrymose Primrose in my home, which meant that I literally had to remodel the entire interior of my home, repaint every room, turn everything into a set. I was literally living in the film myself for a little over 2 years. But because of that, this house is old, and we live in a neighborhood that can at times be very busy, whether it's loud cars, loud neighbors, helicopters, neighbors barking dogs, etc. And we were working in very closed quarters. So I would say that the rooms that we shot in at the largest are no bigger than 8x10, and some of the rooms even smaller. So by the time you get your actors into the room with all of the equipment and the lights and the set dressings, as W.C. Fields once said, it was so crowded we couldn't laugh he, we had to laugh ha ha. But that was, primarily what we were dealing with. So at one point, I believe after the second shoot, I turned to the cast and I said, well, there is no way we can get any clean audio on this. And if this film is going to sound professional and well, afterwards, we're going to have to go back. We're going to have to ADR everything. I am going to have to put all the Foley effects in, from the footsteps, the squeaky doors, the silverware clanging on the plates. Everything was done in post to give it a professional sound. And I think that really allowed me to also focus a lot on my initial intent, which was the sound of the film and, the eeriness that you could convey with somebody just sitting merely on the floor, and then just the auditory horror that you can create. It was a lot of fun.
That blew me away too. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I thought that was just amazing. This isn't exactly, it's not a 20-minute short film. It's a 2-hour feature film that you created as a silent film because of necessity, and then you created all this amazing sound behind it. What was that process like? And I don't know, if I don't want you to give away any trade secrets, although for some folks watching, I'm sure that are filmmakers themselves, I'm sure they want you to. But what was that process like in syncing everything up? Because when you watch the film, especially, and I try to pay attention to this to think, okay, which part of it is going to be, lip sync, like watching a band rock concert or something, where it's all just kind of lip synced or whatever. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell. Everything was seamless.
Oh, wonderful. I tell you what, it was, and I may be masochistic for saying this, as much as I love writing and directing and working on the sets, which I also have to give a quick shout out to my good friend Phil Lear, who flew off from Colorado at one point to help me paint some of the rooms and put new flooring down and really give the overall aesthetic to the film. Greatly appreciated. I digress there. Oh, okay. So being masochistic, as much as I love, the pre-production and the actual production process, post is my absolute favorite, because we really have the ability to play with so much. And for the other filmmakers watching, they know this. And sometimes there are certain things that you can change just by adding a certain sound or sound effect in a scene, and it changes the entire tone. And so for me, as much as we had the scenes lit and so forth, but for me in post-production, working with the Foley effects, adding the music, doing the color grading, oh man, that's because you're watching everything come to life. I find that to be the biggest thrill for me as a filmmaker.
Right. Yeah, no, and I can appreciate that too, as somebody that's certain written stories before. It's almost like that initial for writing, the initial writing, in your case, that initial film, and it almost seems like that's a story that you're kind of telling yourself, but then in the post-production or the editing process, that becomes a story that you're telling the whole world, that you're giving to the world, and it's so cool to be able to sculpt it any way you need to.
Exactly. And a lot of the cuts for the film are based on the music that was used also. So an insider who had a chance to watch the next to the last rough cut said to me that one of the scenes was just so spot on with the music that was going on. And they inquired as to how that fit. And I said, I knew in advance what the piece of music was going to be for that scene. And so it made it really easy in the editing room when I cut that scene together. Every cut shot falls on a certain beat. I mean, there's a lot. I've spent my entire life before film being in bands and being a musician. So there's a wonderful marriage between the two, and things that I'm able to bring to the table as a musician and everything. I know I mentioned cadence before, but the cadence of everything. And when Caleb looks a certain way, just as a certain beat hits with the music, that's not coincidence. Everything's timed out and mapped out accordingly. So it's a lot of fun. It's almost like being a band leader in the editing room, and you're like, okay, we're going to bring in the timpani here, and then I want to splash here, and this. So it's almost like, you know, I'm a conductor orchestrating, and it's
First word that crossed my mind is, yeah, conductor.
yeah. So that's one of my favorite aspects.
Yeah, that's incredible. You really do have to rely on the collaboration of all the people that are involved with you as well, that are doing this, that they have the right vision, that they have the right amount of talent and energy for this, and the same level of passion that you do. Otherwise, you know, you got one little thing off and it throws the entire film for a loop. What can you tell me about that collaboration? Because I know you talked a little bit previously about how some of the, you know, sort of the actors had a pivotal perspective and an opinion that you did in fact use to influence parts of the film. What can you tell me a little bit about that, about getting the band together, so to speak?
You know, it may sound really bizarre, and I don't know with the viewers watching, but I come off as quite the control freak because I have a very set vision of, this is the tone that I want for the movie. This is the aesthetics. This needs to be done this way. But I'm also very liberal as a director in providing my actors and actresses with the freedom to put themselves into the character so they can deviate from the script. It doesn't have to stay verbatim. Having acted in the past and worked with directors that if you forget to say one tiny word that doesn't change the delivery at all, but I guess they're so self-absorbed in what they wrote and yell cut and make you do it again. I'm not that type of director. In fact, the one thing that made it a lot of fun is that while we were filming, despite the fact that I had a clear vision, we took so many chances filming where somebody would make a suggestion, whether it was Ted Bogner, who plays Caleb, or whether it was Michelle Mullins, who plays Elizabeth, or Debbie Starr, that plays Amanda. But somebody would make a suggestion like, why don't we try this? And my response to everything is, what do we have to lose? Let's try it. If it doesn't work, it'll end up on the cutting room floor, but we may end up with something more spectacular than what we all even envisioned. So going into it, it was very important for me as the writer and director that the actors and actresses knew the story inside and out and could get inside the minds of those characters. And once I knew they had a firm grasp on those characters, I let them run wild. I mean, there were times where we were filming Ted, or I should say Caleb, and he is such a method actor and was so unscripted, because my point was, you can deviate and waver as long as you drive the point home that needs to be conveyed. And sometimes when I was watching him when we were filming, I would have to turn away and cover my face because the look of excitement, I was like a 4-year-old on Christmas morning. I didn't want to mess him up because he was in the vibe and he's in the zone. And I'm watching this. I'm just like, oh my God, like this is so cool. You know, it's so good. And so I think when you allow your actors and actresses to have the freedom to not stay completely verbatim and scripted, especially when you bring in, and I've told both Ted Bogner and Michelle Mullins this multiple times, but when I was casting, I knew that for those 2 roles, they were the only 2 actors and actresses that I wanted. Had one of them said, I can't do it, I have a previous engagement, or I just don't really like the story, I think I would have been devastated, and I don't really know how the film would have turned out, because those 2 were just, they were my main choice. And fortunately, they agreed to come aboard.
Very fortunate for all of us. And I know we talked a little bit off air previously, JD, that you know, certainly closer to the film's release, which I obviously want to touch on that in a little bit here, so folks can figure out where they can get this and the amazing package that's awaiting for them upon that release date. Which again, I want to give you a chance to talk about that because I'm excited about that package as well. Even though I've already seen the film, I want that package.
Oh, thank you.
So to talk a little bit about the collaborative approach there of the other folks that were on set there, and also the incredible sacrifice that some of these folks take in order to help you deliver that whole vision. I understand there's one scene, and I don't think this is a spoiler, However, I think it's really important to talk about this, and it's such an example of what guerrilla filmmaking is really all about. The fact that you actually had one of your crew members literally took his life in his own hands to enhance one of the scenes. And I think you know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, most certainly.
Where, holy smokes, you literally you're staring death in the face with every blow of an axe. Can you maybe talk to me a little bit about that as an example of that collaborative effort and how it really does translate into an effective film?
That night of filming literally almost killed me. I thought for certain I was going to die of a heart attack. There's a scene that I won't really go into why it happens or what the end result is, but there's a scene where Caleb is, as the viewer assumes, chopping part of a tree that had fallen, which is also another antagonist part of the story, which I often forget about. I focus on the ghost and the other characters, but I often forget that, believe it or not, the trees were a huge part in being an antagonizing force to Caleb, if I could spit the words out. But lo and behold, a tree falls in the backyard, and we see Caleb chopping it up. And after a few swings of the axe, blood just starts to spray his face and his shirt. And we're like, what is going on? Well, it doesn't seem like it would be that complex. You make a couple squibs, maybe you have a hose, squirt bottle, off camera, something. You wouldn't think it would be that complex. But we had multiple issues with that shoot. Either the blood was too thick to go through a tube, pump out, or once we watered it to get through the tube, it no longer looked realistic. We were just having all kinds of issues with this. And we had actually had an entire day of filming. We probably started at 10 or 11 in the morning, started filming. It's now 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And this is the last scene for the day. And the father of the little girl, Chloe, who played the ghost of Annie, her father, Jacob, steps forward and says, you know what? Let me lay under the log. Every time Caleb swings the axe, I'll throw blood in his face. I said, there's no way in hell I am going to let you do that. I'm picturing, everything's flashing in this eye. My whole entire film career is going by. And on this end, I'm going to lose my house and everything that I've worked for. And I implored him. I implored him numerous times, please, Jacob, please do not do this. I do not feel comfortable with this at all. He insisted. He said, if I need to sign a waiver, putting all the blame on me, because I'm thinking, and I do believe that it had either rained at one point that day or we were just starting to get a dew on the grass.
Okay.
And once you start getting a little bit of blood thrown at you, the axe handle becomes slippier, mixed with the moisture in the air and the dew. And so I'm picturing Caleb coming down, and I warned Ted in advance, please make it look believable, but don't put all your might into it. Well, Ted, being the method actor that he is, he gets inside the character's head and loses all control of himself. So he's literally swinging this axe as hard as he can, and Jacob's splattering the blood up. And I kid you not when I say there may have been 6 to 8 inches of space from where, and also too, had Caleb, being that he's in his own mind, in the zone, had he swung while Jacob's hand was out like this, I mean, I'm picturing fingers lopped off, everything gone, the most stressful part of the entire film. But thank God nobody was injured. And the scene worked very well because of Jacob's commitment to the film and willingness to either hurt or, literally kill himself.
That is fantastic. I'm so glad it worked out really well for you. I'm just thinking, even as you're talking about that and in the details, I'm like, forget the clapboard of take whatever it is. It's like, okay, here's Exhibit A that's going to end up on an evidence table in this major court case.
Yeah, yes, I was very worried about that. But, I mean, a lot of respect to Jacob for that. He was very adamant that we allowed him to do that. And wouldn't take no for an answer. So I finally caved and, trusted that I trusted that he felt safe enough and had it worked out in his mind of how he would do it safely, that because he was so insistent about it, that I let him roll with it. So, but I definitely wasn't in favor of it for the most part.
I can appreciate that. I mean, it's nerve-wracking just listening to it, but thank goodness it worked out really well. Everybody kept their limbs, and the show got made without a real ghost on set, so that worked out great.
Yes.
And speaking of which, too, I obviously I want to talk to you about the releasing, because one of the amazing, what I consider to be a story behind the scenes that absolutely blew my mind is, I'll digress for a minute, because the first that I'm thinking about with sort of a writerly background is, it's not too uncommon, if anything, it's more champion than ever before, to see an author who is self-publishing their books. It's not too often that I hear about it. Maybe I'm just not in the know here. Maybe you can educate me on that if there's other examples of this, that a filmmaker, for lack of a better way to put it, has the balls to self-release a film, because there's so much involved with that. There's so much that could go wrong. And generally that's something that you would rely on a distributor or a production company to do, let alone take everything on your own shoulders. How the heck did that come about? And what can you tell us about the process and what your end goal is in mind, or what your frame of thought is on taking this incredible film and self-releasing it?
Well, firstly, it just seems like a natural progression, because I've been so hands-on with every facet of my films, and Lachrymose being the most hands-on, because obviously I didn't need to be nearly as hands-on with Noctambulous, that was a black and white silent, but everything with Lachrymose, from writing, directing, color grading, editing, music scores, Foley effects, DVD cover art, poster art, it's been all on me. So I guess it's a natural progression, and I don't say this disparagingly to anyone out there as far as distribution companies, but I've been signed for years now with my films up till Lachrymose, and I've also been signed to a publishing deal in the book world as well. My gripe with any distribution, whether it's a book publishing company or a film distribution company, is that we as independent artists feel that you're working to get signed. Most of us purposely stay outside of the Hollywood system.
Sure.
And we do that by choice for certain reasons. There's a certain sense of freedom that we have being independent artists. But we all have that ambition that we would like somebody to pick our film up and distribute it. And when you finally achieve that, I know I did, which is funny, because my film distribution deal and my book publishing deal happened pretty much at the same time. And I was just over the moon. I thought, here we go. This is everything that, and at that time I hadn't even really been making films for that long. My film career started in 2010 with a short, and I signed my first film distribution deal in 2014 or 2015. So, 4 or 5 years really isn't that long when you think about it. So I was like over the moon. I'm like, here we go. I finally got a distribution deal, etc. And again, not speaking to anybody that I was signed with, I'm speaking on behalf of all independent filmmakers and or authors, because all of my friends in the industry, I see that they all have a common complaint. And that is, if you get signed, and whether it's the book publishing company or whether it's the film distribution company, they don't want to do anything to put promotion into the film. They're happy. It's almost as though they're hoarders, signing as many artists as they possibly can. But then once they sign you, they don't want to promote you or do anything with you, and they expect that the artist does that. So here's my issue. If you trust in my work enough to give me a distribution deal or book publishing deal, then obviously you wouldn't trust that this is something that's going to sell to readers or viewers out there, and you would want to promote that. Instead, they put it back on the artist. Now, I could either sit around all day on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and do nothing but try to say, hey, go check out my movie. Here's this, here's that. Or I could focus on making new art. And given the fact that I'm pretty much 50 years old and didn't grow up in the era where we were all obsessed with the internet, I'm still at the point where I can't wait for everything to just collapse and we go back to in-print books, in-print magazines, in-print everything, and there's no internet, just the whole grid collapses and be done with it. Because, I'm just from that generation where I'm not. And so I feel that it's very unfair for most artists. If they do have a distribution company, and from my understanding, everybody that I know and work with, their experiences are all the same, where they're signed, but now it's up to you to go ahead and try to promote your work and get it out there. And let's face it, there's a reason why there are marketing teams. Just because I'm a great artist, and I'm not saying that I'm a great artist, I'm just saying in general, just because one is a great artist, it does not mean that they're great at publicity. I will be the first to tell you, I've been told in the past I'm not bad with publicity, but I am terrible at business. Absolutely terrible. I have no business sense. I'm an artist. So, trying to put that pressure on an artist that may be an absolutely fabulous author or an absolutely fabulous filmmaker, and then say, well, that's your gift. And even though you know nothing about promotion and marketing, we're still going to put that on your shoulder. And that's going to be the fate of your product on whether or not it does well or not. So I thought, what is my reasoning to want to be signed? If I'm still doing all the work on the back end, then why do I want somebody taking a certain amount of the profits when I still have to do it all myself anyway? So let's just eliminate the middleman and self-release the film. And it can't hurt to see how it goes. So.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I really appreciate that as well. And I've certainly heard a lot of horror stories, trying to deal with, some distributors are great, but it really is a bit of a crapshoot out there. And like you said, a lot of times it's almost like these certain, production companies or distributors, all they're really interested in is building up their library so they can say, hey, look at our library. We've got all this many films, so you should be one of them because obviously we're doing something right. And then meanwhile, you just get lost in the crowd.
Absolutely. And the one thing that most independent filmmakers don't know, and believe me, everything I do is to support independent artists. Let me just say this right now. I've since day one, when I've got into this line of work, I've preached to people to lose your egos, to lose anything. It's all about the camaraderie, support one another, help each other up. If somebody makes a fabulous movie, I do not begrudge them because they made a fantastic film. It sets the bar and raises the bar for me. I'm like, oh shit, I love what Vito Trabucco just did, or I love what James Balsamo just did, or I love, what Michael S. Rodriguez just made. And now they raised the bar for me to make my next feature better. And it's a friendly competitiveness. And so everything going back to my first documentary that I made, Blood on the Reel, it's always been about helping independent artists. And if I do have any bit of information to share that's helpful, and, the one thing that these distribution companies don't understand, and hopefully this bit of insight helps somebody watching, is that you can hire an aggregator. It costs about $2,000 to $2,500. You hire an aggregator. They're a firm that has an in with Netflix and Hulu and, Showtime and HBO and all these other places. You can hire an aggregator for about $2,000 to $2,500. They take care of all the legwork, try to get you on your desired platform. For that price, you get to choose, two certain mediums of your choice. So if you wanted it to be a Hulu exclusive, or you wanted to be, you can do that. And then anything after those two costs more on top of that. So it's almost like for streaming television, when you're buying your packages, for each additional channel you want, you have to pay a little bit more for it. But so, there are many avenues that you can go. And I really don't know if I'm going to go through the whole process of hiring an aggregator and paying them to try to get in. Nowadays, the world is at the filmmaker's fingertips. And I know it seems bleak, and I see a lot of, and believe me, cinema is not what it is. I wish we could do away with streaming and make everybody go out to theatrical screenings and see the films in the cinemas. Unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in, but we are afforded the luxury, unlike if you were to grow up in the early 80s, 90s, where we can upload our films to a lot of places on our own and get the film out there without relying on a distribution company that might not properly represent your film. And again, I'm generalizing when I say distribution company. I'm speaking of all of the independent distribution, not all, but a majority of the ones that I know. They don't handle their artists fairly. And that doesn't mean anything with payouts in regards to that, but it's just the promotion, the publicity, especially when distribution companies tell you that they're going to promote your film, and you get excited because you think, okay, part of my cut goes towards this promotion. And then an ad's run in a publication, but your film is a tiny little thumbnail image mixed in with 100 other movies in their catalog. And so who really pays attention to that one little thumbnail image on a magazine page? So I feel like us as independent artists, I want to look out for us. And my hopes with not only self-releasing Lachrymose is that I really hope to give a voice to other independent filmmakers, because I have some things in mind for filmmakers that might not procure distribution any other way. For instance, making a short movie, whether it's a 15, 20-minute short, there's no distribution opportunity for those people. Distribution companies.
Very low.
Yeah, very low. So, there are certain things that I have in mind to be able to work with other independent filmmakers. Once I get my footing, I'm still learning the ropes myself as we go through this process of self-distribution. But as time goes on and I feel much more comfortable with that, I'd like to help out all fellow filmmakers if I'm able to.
Great. Well, that is some amazing insight, JD. Thank you very much for that. And I've no doubt that there's at least a few people out here watching this that hopefully are taking some notes and realizing that they're maybe not in that in the peanut shell that they might have thought that they were. And I do want to talk to you certainly more about what you mentioned about helping and supporting other filmmakers that might want to take the same approach, which I definitely want to encourage you to watch this too. So I do want to revisit another conversation so we can dig more into some of the behind the scenes stuff, what you're doing regarding helping to support other filmmakers with self-releasing. But at this point, I want to talk to you about a little bit more about what you are self-releasing and the package that you're putting together for all of us. So I definitely want to leave this on a high note. I'm really excited about this package. Like I said, I've seen this film now twice in the two different iterations, the early and the final. But when is the film going to be released?
Mid-January will be the release, and that will be for the Blu-ray DVD. However, we do have something that I hope others will find exciting throughout our post-production meetings and gearing up to self-release. There were several options that we considered as far as wanting to give the audience something special or just something fun, something, some type of novelty to look forward to. And one of the things that was suggested was to release the movie in 3D. I sat on that at first. I was like, yeah, okay, it'd be cool. No. Long story short, we have a 3D version of the movie, which will be available. However, for all of us cinephiles out there and VHS collectors, I don't know when I can't say for certain when this will release. Shortly after the initial drop, which, like I said, the primary release is the streaming, the DVD, and the Blu-ray. But shortly thereafter, there will be a limited run VHS sale, which will be the 3D version of the film, complete with 3D glasses. And so if you really want that old school 80s vibe, then you can watch it on VHS with your 3D lenses.
What a cool idea. That's super exciting. I think that's pretty awesome. Maybe it's because we're all getting older and we're being more nostalgic. Like, man, wouldn't it be cool to be a kid again? Well, the nice thing is that we live in a world of accessibility as well. So it's cool seeing all that old school stuff coming back, between cassette tapes, VHS, vinyl. I don't think vinyl's ever really gone away. It's just a matter of how popular it's been through certain stages of time. But that's super cool that you are putting all this together for us all.
I hope everyone, enjoys it. And it's just something that I would like to see. Anytime that we speak about what we're going to release or how it's going to be released, I try to think of how would I, as a fan of cinema, how would I appreciate this? And if somebody was releasing, and let's face it, a lot of the 80s 3D movies, it was great because you got to watch them. You got to put on your anamorphic 3D lenses. They weren't too super crazy either with the 3D aspect. But regardless, it was still fun to put the 3D glasses on, pop the popcorn in the air popper. You know what I mean? So I will be upfront. There's definitely a 3D element to the movie. I mean, everything was created in post in 3D. You're not going to get the same vibe as you do with shooting with anaglyphic lens camera. It looks great. Like when I watch it with 3D glasses, I'm like, okay, this is fun. This is fun. Even, just all the prep work, getting the 3D glasses out, watching it. So open.
Right. Well, I can't wait. I'm sure that everybody watching this can't wait as well. I want to kind of leave everybody with this. So as much as this is ultimately a bit of a ghost story, that's not your typical ghost story, that has more to do with the main character's inner demons and all the things that haunt him because of his attachment to things that are perhaps not the best thing for him to attach himself to. Do you have any last words for everybody, or any haunting things you want to leave folks with regarding this film, Lachrymose Primrose, when it's going to be coming out, and what you're hoping that folks get out of this experience?
Firstly, I would really just like to implore people to check it out. I feel you and I spoke off camera yesterday for quite extensive period of time. I feel like, and also too, because we're self-releasing this film, that it might be a film at first that people might sleep on, but I definitely feel that if people give the film a chance, they're going to be in for a treat that they weren't expecting. And of course, I go back and hearken to all of my favorite films of all time, where a lot of them got a really slow start in popularity, and it took a while to really catch on. And some of those films later became favorites or, cult classics. So I would really like to implore people to give the movie a watch. The one thing that I'm very proud of is the fact that we did it with such a skeleton crew, and the fact that all of the special effects that are in the film are practical effects. Down to the ghost, nothing was CGI. There's no CGI at all in the film. So if you're a fan of practical effects and sleight of hand trickery without CGI, and you like a really good story, this isn't a movie that, I hate to really say it's a thinking man and woman's film, but I don't know. I mean, you've seen it. Maybe you can reaffirm that, but I do believe it's one of those films where you really sit in and get into, but you really have to focus to. It's not just a fun, crazy romp that you can mindlessly throw on. So,
yeah, no, very well said, and I will absolutely, certainly reaffirm that as well. As I mentioned to you off air yesterday as well, that a couple of the films that kind of came to mind as far as its overall, I guess, lack of a better way to put it, maybe sensibilities and the overall vibe of the film was really almost a nice cross between The Exorcist and The Godfather. Which obviously this isn't The Exorcist, this isn't The Godfather. However, you definitely get a lot of those creepy, intense moments that you would certainly get in The Exorcist. Regarding The Godfather, you certainly have that classic feel to the film, but there's also a lot of similar sensibilities I found in that you can create what would normally be a very mundane scene, such as The Godfather. You could certainly have Michael Corleone sitting back in a chair, thinking without even any voiceover, and that's an intense film. And you can read between the lines when you think about everything that happened before and what the possibilities are, what might be happening after. You get a pretty good sense of what's maybe going through, Michael Corleone's mind. As in this film, you get a pretty good sense of what's going on in Caleb's mind, with as long as you're paying attention, consider what happened before, and entertain the possibilities, what's likely going through his head in that moment. So I found there's a really nice crossover between those two sensibilities and those two vibes, if you will. I thought it just executed perfectly.
I love that description. I laughed when you had mentioned The Godfather because it's rather funny. That movie in particular came up a lot during the filming.
Interesting.
Or I should say of post-production, not that we were trying to have that effect, but it was more because of the runtime. The initial cut of the movie came in at almost, I think it was 2 hours and 43 minutes was the first rough cut of the film. And I don't know if you've seen the television show The Offer, which was based on the making of The Godfather, but where Coppola and Puzo are fighting with the production company over the runtime, and they're basically saying, you have to cut this down and you have to chop it because right now we're only going to get 2 theatrical showings a day instead of 3, and you're costing us money because of this length. And there was just a lot of similarities that came up throughout the whole process that reminded us of the Godfather film. And it's such a classic film, But yeah, it's actually wild to think that the initial cut was like 2 hours and 43 minutes, and we shaved that down to a 97-minute film without, I feel like it only helped better. I don't feel like we lost any of the tension or the drama by cutting it down, which is often the case when you take a movie and really trim it down to that.
Yeah, I think if anything, as I was mentioning to you off air as well, that I think it really added to the drama because you don't really get any rest. There's no lulls in it at all. It's just, it moved along really, really nicely. I do want to thank you very much for joining us here today. This has been an awesome experience, and certainly lived up to all my expectations and all the hype since first talking to you about this about a year ago, then seeing the film, and then talking to you off air yesterday. So I really super appreciate this. Cannot wait for this. And what I'll do too for folks watching this, guys, is I'm going to put a link down below. I understand you've got some teaser trailers that are available for folks to watch, so I will absolutely put those down below so that people can get a better sense of it. And maybe by the description, folks aren't quite hooked on this, but I guarantee you guys, you're going to see the trailer and you're going to be pretty pumped up to see the rest of the film as I was. So I'm looking forward to doing that. So, and as I mentioned, JD, I'm also looking forward to if you'll be on my show again here once the release date does hit. I really do want to talk to you again, so you can maybe dig into a little bit more of the meat and the behind the scenes stuff too. I'd be excited to talk to you about that.
Thank you. I would be more than happy to come back and speak with you. And it's been the utmost pleasure. I sincerely, wholeheartedly appreciate you having me on and the support that you show to the independent filmmakers and actresses and actors. It's truly, like I said, to me, it's all about camaraderie and a community that I feel like it's insane when I think that I've been into this in some way. Despite the fact that Lachrymose is only my 3rd feature-length film, I've helped behind the scenes on numerous films and had a couple shorts when I was starting out that would never. But I mean, the amount of work that I've done for the past 13 years in the indie scene, I can't envision myself doing anything different. And the fact that we have wonderful people like yourself that are so passionate about the scene and willing to give us a voice is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, well, it's certainly reciprocated. So thank you very much. Keep making those films for us all to enjoy, and we will see you. We'll see you a little bit later on.
Yeah, stay tuned for January 15th, mid-January. Lachrymose Primrose, Blu-ray, DVD, and shortly there to follow the 3D VHS. But and if you get a chance, check us out on our Facebook page. I'm not really into social media, so we have a Twitter page that I think I may have ever made 5 posts on, and it's you know what I mean. So, but if you're on Facebook and want to check out the Lachrymose Facebook page, please do so. Thank you.